911, what's your emergency?
Yeah, I was just coming around the corner. I think I see a dead body. I'm sure I see a dead body.
Sir, what's the address?
Yeah, it's right off the corner of Shimon Street.
Okay, what's your name?
Englestead, a small town in Europe that's known for its picturesque landscapes, friendly locals, and charming architecture. But in 1999, this serene town was hit by a string of gruesome murders that shook the community to its core. What began as a few missing persons quickly turned into a nightmare for the small town. Rumors and speculation spread like wildfire, and people grew increasingly paranoid as the days passed. But it all got worse when the bodies started showing up. At first, they were just fragments, a piece of clothing here, a tuft of hair there. But soon enough, entire corpses began to surface, their lifeless eyes staring blankly at the sky. The police were baffled, they had never seen anything like this before. The townspeople were terrified, they had never felt so vulnerable. The first body was discovered by a group of kids who were playing in the woods. They stumbled upon a corpse that was completely drained of blood. The police were called in, and they assumed that it was just a freak accident or a random act of violence. But then more bodies started appearing, and they all had one thing in common: they were drained of blood. It was the beginning of a long and difficult investigation, with the hope of finding answers and bringing justice to those affected. Police began their investigation by interviewing a few witnesses, starting with an elderly lady who claimed to have seen the murderer. She had been walking through the graveyard one moonless night when she saw something move in the shadows. At first, she thought it was just a stray cat or a raccoon, but as she got closer, she saw that it was something much more sinister. A dark, looming figure, with glowing eyes and an aura of dread that sent shivers down her spine. The old lady described clutching her rosary tightly in fear as she watched the figure disappear into the darkness. It was a moment she would never forget, as the memory of the dark figure and the feeling of dread it had left behind continued to haunt her. Despite her vivid description, the authorities dismissed her account as the ramblings of an eccentric old woman and continued their investigation, hoping for more concrete leads. They interviewed a man who claimed to have had a close encounter with the murderer. He described how he had been walking near the cemetery one evening, when he suddenly felt as though he was being followed. Panicked, he had run as fast as he could towards the town square, trying to make himself appear as casual as possible. Desperate to blend in with the other pedestrians, he had even bought a garlic shawarma from a nearby vendor. To his relief, the figure that had been trailing him had quickly disappeared into the shadows once he reached the safety of the town square. The police commended him for his quick thinking and advised him to always stay in public spaces if he felt unsafe. The police interviewed one of the individuals who called 911 to report a murder. The witness recounted hearing a blood-curdling scream while walking down the street. They immediately ran around the corner to investigate and found a lifeless body lying on the ground. The witness described what they saw in detail, but unfortunately, they didn't see the perpetrator. The only thing they mentioned was that they saw a bat fly away from the scene of the crime. The police thanked the witness for their information, but advised them not to spend too much time describing random animals, as it might not be relevant to the investigation. The forensic lab report indicated that the victim's blood had been completely drained from their body through 2 puncture marks on their neck. The report noted that the puncture marks were consistent in size and depth, suggesting that they were made by the same instrument. The lab also reported that there were no signs of struggle or resistance from the victim, indicating that they were caught off guard or possibly even incapacitated before the attack. They interviewed witnesses, combed through the crime scenes, and even brought in outside experts to help solve the case. But nothing seemed to make sense. That's when they decided to consult with the town doctor, Dr. John Acula. The doctor was a highly regarded surgeon in the community, with a reputation for his unparalleled knowledge of human biology and expertise in complex surgeries. His colleagues sought his opinion on intricate procedures, and his patients trusted him with their lives. So, when the police approached him for his insights on the murders, he willingly lent his expertise. Even though his busy schedule only permitted him to meet at night, the police were willing to work around it to get his expert opinion on the case. Despite his peculiar working hours, the doctor was a valued asset to the investigation, and the authorities were grateful for his willingness to assist in any way he could. He suggested that the culprit must be someone who knows how to handle meat, someone who knows how to cut and drain blood from an animal. This led the police to focus their investigation on the local butcher, a man named Frank. Frank had always been a bit of an oddball, and he wasn't exactly well liked in the community. But the police had no concrete evidence to prove that he was responsible for the murders. They kept an eye on him, but they didn't have enough to arrest him. As the weeks went by, more bodies were discovered, and the police were getting desperate. They knew that they needed to catch the killer before he struck again. But they were running out of options. As the investigation into the gruesome murders continued, the police stumbled upon a curious scene at one of the victims' homes. The walls were adorned with an array of crucifixes, as if to ward off some unseen evil. Upon further investigation, they discovered a journal hidden away, its pages filled with cryptic messages and fearful ramblings about a devil in the night. As the police continued to review the evidence found at the victim's home, they began to piece together a theory. The walls adorned with crucifixes, the cryptic messages in the journal, and the brutal murders all seemed to point to one suspect: the town butcher. Despite the lack of any concrete evidence linking the butcher to the crime scene, the police were convinced that they had found their man. They claimed that the victim probably didn't eat meat, and therefore the butcher was like the devil to them, as if he had come straight out of hell to commit these heinous crimes. Finally, the police made their move, arresting the unsuspecting butcher and parading him through the town in shackles. After the arrest of the suspected killer, the town breathed a collective sigh of relief. Fear had gripped the community for so long, and the murders had left everyone on edge. But with the killer behind bars, the sense of safety slowly returned. The mayor, grateful for the invaluable assistance provided by the town doctor in helping to solve the case, decided to bestow upon him the highest honor, the key to the city. Without the doctor's expert insight and contributions to the investigation, the case may have never been solved, and the town would still be living in fear. As for Dr. Aquila himself, he later moved to a different town. It wasn't long before the police there needed his help in solving a similar murder scene. One thing is for sure, Dr. Aquila''s expertise in the macabre will be remembered for generations to come. Here's hoping he lives forever. After all, he is a great man. If you enjoyed today's authentic, absolutely true, 100% real, definitely not AI-generated true crime story, please feel free to like, subscribe and leave a comment.